It is a very traumatic situation. I mean, the pressure is immense on these folks.
In the control room, engineers are devising emergency plans even before they can properly assess the damage to the plant. In the small fishing village of Otsuchi, the damage is painfully obvious.
The air's filled with smoke.
Through an eerie haze hanging above the harbor, Tara Millen and her colleagues from Sea Shepherd are overwhelmed by the scene below.
There's no emotion that can describe it because you're just standing there in complete shock. Like, how could this happen?
As they make their way down the hill, it's clear the only way out will be on foot. Each step takes them closer to the destruction they barely escaped.
This is what our road used to be. Last night it was flooding with water.
Power poles were down, the power lines were live and on the ground. We didn't know if they had power in them, so we traversed over them carefully.
Watch out for the power lines.
It was just complete devastation. Like, cars turned over. The tsunami wall was under the water. It was a huge wall. It was, this thick.
We're currently traversing our way, trying to get out of here. We got past the spot where the road had broken.
The road was literally cut in half, and there was, a waterfall going through it, and it was just completely surreal.
Just 24 hours before, this thriving waterfront was bustling with activity. Now, it's silent and still.
Maybe 1% of the houses were still standing, and the only house that was standing that I could see is where everybody was sleeping that night. It was strange because we were there earlier in the day, and you look in every direction, there's just absolutely nothing.
We hiked all the way up this hill and up and around. Found a community of people. I think this is where they used to live.
They were devastated. You could tell, and they were in shock just as much as we were.
Are those what I think they are?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Oh goodness.
They had these beds laid out, and I didn't realize it when I was looking at them. I thought that's where they slept, but it was their family members who had died that were piled on these beds under blankets. I'd never seen a dead person before, so it hits home to you that we weren't that far from being the same.
Tara is 5,000 miles from home, face to face with a small group of strangers who are in the throes of an unimaginable tragedy. They don't speak English. Tara doesn't speak Japanese. The only thing they share is a common humanity.
What were they able to communicate?
Sadness,
to you?
But still love, because, they offered food to us. They made special little rice balls for everybody so they could, eat them. And I mean, it's the generosity I was astounded by.
It is a remarkable moment of grace and dignity. Tara and Mike decide to try to make their way to the inland city of Tono, 27 miles away.
This is it. It's the last we will likely ever see of Otsuchi.
The heartbreak is not limited to Otsuchi. Inside the Fukushima plant, many workers don't know if their families have survived or if their homes are even still standing. It's a horrible burden for those trying to avert a nuclear disaster. The challenge of the task and the spirit of the workers is captured by plant employee Michiko Otsuki. She writes,
"We carried on working to restore the reactors with the realization that this could be certain death. There are many who haven't gotten in touch with their family members."
At Fukushima, the situation inside the plant is deteriorating. The incident is elevated to a level 4 accident. The workers are most concerned about Unit 1, where cooling systems are out and fuel rods are overheating.
You could have severe core damage and a much larger accident.
Conditions inside the 65-foot tall steel reactor vessel are unstable. Even though the plant isn't operational, fuel is still releasing huge amounts of heat. Normally, fresh water circulates through the vessel to prevent overheating. But without power, the water is heating up, evaporating, and turning to steam. As the water level drops, the rods that encase uranium fuel pellets become exposed. The temperature reaches 2,200 degrees, triggering a chemical reaction in the superheated water. Hydrogen gas is created. The pressure inside the reactor keeps growing.
That chemical reaction is exothermic, which means it adds heat to an already bad situation.
The operators are worried about a full meltdown. They could lead to a catastrophic release of highly radioactive material into the environment. To reduce the pressure, they try to vent the steam and hydrogen out of the reactor.
The procedure books weren't helping that much anymore. So now they're trying to use their judgment to best manage a rapidly degrading, dangerous situation.
Somehow, the incredibly volatile hydrogen gas is collecting in the outer building. 3:36 p.m. A massive blast rips through Unit 1. A huge cloud of metal, concrete, and possibly radioactive particles is blown into the sky. The accident is suddenly looking like a full-blown nuclear disaster.
Desde las que se insertan en tu cuerpo, hasta las que nos llevan al espacio. Desde las que hacen tu vida más cómoda, hasta las que te torturan. Todas tienen sus secretos. Y no es solo lo que hacen, es también cómo lo hacen. Maquinomanía, nuevo episodio, esta noche a las 9 en Discovery Channel.
4000 años atrás, los bosques primigenios de Europa son asaltados por otra demanda. Más agresiva que nunca. Y en áreas remotas, hasta entonces vírgenes. La producción de metal. La fundición de cobre y bronce pronto se extiende desde los países balcánicos y Chipre a través de gran parte de Europa. El metal significa riqueza y poder. Los depósitos metalíferos esparcidos por todo el continente se convierten en el incentivo principal para la conquista. Y con estas luchas surge la imperial superpotencia europea. 600 años antes de Cristo, el Imperio Romano se pone en marcha. Su objetivo no es solo la conquista, sino la civilización de la Europa salvaje. Conquistar con lanza y espada, declara la misión del ejército romano, montando la mayor empresa de construcción de caminos que haya existido. Todos los caminos conducen a Roma, dice el refrán. Pero lo contrario es la verdad. Todos los caminos salen de Roma. Como queriendo capturar a un animal salvaje, el imperio extiende una red de caminos cubriendo el continente, desde Italia hasta Gran Bretaña y desde Turquía hasta España. Via est vita, dice el proverbio romano. El camino es la vida.
The crisis at the Fukushima nuclear facility seems to be spiraling out of control. The focus is on trying to prevent another massive explosion, like the one that blew apart the reactor building in Unit 1.
How dangerous was the explosion?
Well, if you're local to the explosion, it's the debris of the steel falling out of the sky. Huge multi-ton pieces of steel that were thrown up hundreds of meters and it fell down.
Officials from the Japanese utility company TEPCO tell the world that the radiation release from the explosion is modest. But the charred remains of Unit 1 raise fears that the situation is worse than it seems. A full meltdown is a real possibility. To avoid this ultimate nuclear nightmare, and without any fresh water available, engineers make a desperate call. Seawater will be used to cool the reactors. Because there's no power, they bring in fire trucks and will use their pumps to get water into the reactor vessel.
When engineers have to bring a fire truck into a nuclear reactor to cool it down, that is not a good day.
The injection of seawater is basically game over.
Game over, because the salt water will damage critical systems, rendering the plant useless.
Somebody may have told the boss, I'm going to ruin a $5 billion plant here, okay?
Because it causes severe corrosion, right?
Right. So units 1 through 4 will never run again.
The footage of the Unit 1 explosion plays again and again on television and the internet. Tara Millen, Mike Voss, and the team from Sea Shepherd watched the crisis unfold from a hotel. After a harrowing 13-hour walk, they were able to hitch a ride to the city of Tono. They're exhausted and in a state of shock. Now the news of an explosion and the threat of radiation is almost too much to bear.
Were you truly concerned about exposure to radiation?
We certainly were. We said, let's get as far away from this area as we possibly can, because I didn't realize up until that point that the radiation was that bad until people in Tono were panicking.
At that point, it just didn't seem like reality anymore. Our minds were just, we need to get home and we need to get out of here.
Mike, Tara, and their colleagues find a ride out of Tono. Before long, they'll be on a flight home. At Fukushima, the crisis is developing on multiple fronts. The cooling pump in Unit 3 fails. The water level inside that reactor is dropping, and the pressure is rising. But before they can add water, they must release gas.
The pressure inside the reactor vessel is 1,000 pounds per square inch. The firewater pumps can't develop that much pressure. So there was a need to reduce the pressure in the reactor vessel down to below the point where the pumps could actually send water into the reactor vessel instead of being stuck pumping and deadheading against such high pressure. In order to reduce pressure, there are relief valves on the main steam lines that the workers can open to bleed off some of the pressure, kind of like on an air car tire. You open up the valve, you allow some air to come out of the tire. The workers will open up the relief valves, bleeding off pressure of the reactor vessel down to the point where the makeup pumps could do their thing and inject seawater.
But before workers can even catch their breath, a hydrogen explosion blows out the top of Unit 3. 11 workers are injured. The Fukushima plant is beginning to resemble a war zone.
You could see it evident in television, in all the news conferences, in the voices of the officials, and felt like the worst was yet to come.
Ken Belson is covering the story for the New York Times in Tokyo, where powerful aftershocks show no signs of letting up.
There were 3, 4, 5 a day, some of them quite large. When you're sitting in your chair, you can't tell whether you've just sort of rolled the wheels on the chair or another earthquake's about to come. And that gets a little disconcerting.
Back at the plant, engineers devise a new plan to vent pressure from Unit 2. It will require an incredibly dangerous mission.
The engineers or plant managers sent operators up into the Unit 2 reactor building, and they took out large 20-foot panels out of the wall.
They improvised it.
They improvised this. They thought out of the box and took that panel out to allow the hydrogen gas to diffuse out of the building.
When they removed the panel, explosive hydrogen gas and steam escape. The procedure is a success. At dawn, yet another explosion rocks the plant. The roof is blown off Unit 4. Around the plant, radiation levels spike. Iodine-131 and cesium-137 are in the air, threatening to penetrate workers' bodies, damage DNA, and cause sickness or cancer.
You don't want to breathe it into your lungs because then you get a dose inside your body. That's why they wear suits and they wear respirators.
Radiation poisoning is on the mind of American software consultant Chris Hope. He was inside the Fukushima complex when the earthquake hit. Now back home in Idaho, he's checked for radiation exposure. Nothing is found, but he's still haunted by what's happening in Japan. The experience has left him shaken and humbled.
I'm kind of reliving those few